Everybody, kind of an exciting and fun thing is about attention, inattentional blindness. And there are two videos that I've taken from YouTube that are in this folder that I encourage you to look at that show this remarkable effect. Uh, and one of them involves a basketball game, and there's also a video with change blindness that involves people giving directions on the campus of Cornell. So this is fairly recent. It goes back to maybe 2000 or so. 2002, it says. A recent area of research in attention concerns a phenomenon known as inattentional blindness. And the idea is not perceiving a stimulus or something that might be right in front of you unless you're paying attention to it. And the video that you'll see in this folder is of a gorilla coming on through a basketball game in a dorm hallway there, beating his chest or her chest and departing. So that's the idea. Now, how could this really happen? How can a person be looking at an object and not see it? Well, there are experiments that demonstrate that, but figure 4.3 shows what happens in this video. Participants were asked to follow a white team or a black team by their shirts and to count the number of times they were watching a passed basketball or to keep track separately of both passes and aerial passes that don't bounce. That's the harder. So bounce passes or passes through the air both, which would be harder to do. So that's kind of a toughie. And after some seconds of that, one of two unexpected events occurred. There could be somebody walking through with an umbrella, or there's also a gorilla, somebody in a gorilla shirt that walked through. Now, you could ask yourself, well, how did people not see this? And one thing I would draw your attention to is the table on the bottom of page 84. These are the percentage of subjects noticing the unexpected event in each condition. And you'll notice, this is kind of intriguing. I'm adjusting my microphone. I need to remove my glasses. That more people recognized the gorilla when they were keeping track of the team in the black t-shirts. And why might that be? Well, the suggestion is that because they were paying attention to the black t-shirts, they could absorb the character of the gorilla that happened to have a black outfit on. The fur was a dark color. So overall, 46% of participants failed to notice either the umbrella woman or the gorilla. Only 44% of participants ever reported seeing the gorilla, although this number was much greater for those watching the black t-shirt team, who presumably share more features with the gorilla because their shirts were dark. So these authors concluded that unexpected events can be overlooked. If we're watching the team in white, we certainly don't see anything happening to the darker figure. So presumably we only see those events to which we attend, especially if the unexpected event is dissimilar. If I were watching the white t-shirt team, it would be the case that I would be less likely to see the gorilla and sort of dismiss it as a piece of background noise. But the table at the bottom of 84 really tells that story. Clearly, there's more absorption. In any case, whether the task is easy, just keeping track of bounce passes, or both sorts of passes, that you could see the gorilla more easily if I'm paying attention to the black team, which is kind of interesting. Now, the other sort of blindness is this idea, let me click down, of change blindness. This one's even more comical. Imagine that a person approaches you and asks for directions. You oblige and then begin describing the route. While you're talking, two people go right through the conversation carrying a door. Wouldn't you notice that the person you were speaking to was then replaced by a completely different person? And you'd like to think so, but in fact only about half the participants did notice that they had been talking to was replaced by a second person. And why is that the case? Well, the change in person went undetected even though the two interviewers were of different heights and builds, and had noticeably different voices and haircuts and everything. So the student participants were more likely to notice the change than were older participants, which is kind of interesting. And when the two interviewers donned construction worker clothing, fewer than half of the students noticed the change. Kind of interesting. So investigators have looked to see whether they can predict who will and won't be affected by this inattentional blindness. Now, they haven't had the perfect results, but this is another implication of working memory there at the bottom of page 85, that those people that have lower working memory, in other words, they're not as good at keeping many things at the front of mind, had worse change blindness. And so another authors as recently as 2011 found the same thing, that they basically what helps you notice the gorilla or other things is working memory, basically a capacity to recognize things and keep many things basically at the front of mind, more spry attention. And working memory is considered, and I'll give you an example. I think in the previous video I may have mentioned it. If I read somebody a list of numbers, say 8 numbers or 7 numbers, 8, 6, 7, 5, 3, 0, 9, say those backwards. Oh my gosh. 9, 0, 3, 5, 7, 6, 8. And then I keep going with longer and longer lists of numbers. That taps working memory. And for reasons not totally explained, it's the case that those with better working memory tend to perform those tasks better. The suggestion is you may have greater executive control in the frontal lobe, and thus you're more, I guess you could say, I'm straining for a word here, but more perceptive and less likely to follow the trend on change blindness or inattentional blindness. So, but again, I encourage you to look at those 2 very brief videos. They're funny. They were the hot thing roughly 25 years ago in the late 90s. They were passed around when the internet and YouTube itself was really in its infancy. But even now they depict a really interesting trend.